Yep, I know, I'm sorry. I finally did it. I went a week without making a video. I'm not particularly pleased that this happened, but there are reasons why it ended up like that. But I shan't spend too long wallowing on that. I shall close by saying that after watching Kaiji, I simply decided I did not really want to review Kaiji, and so to those who requested it, I am sorry, but I will sadly never review Kaiji. Probably. But anyway, after that minor hiccup, we are back on track and ready to crack back on with, well, this. So hello, welcome back, and I present to you a review of Towa no Quon, a 6-part supernatural 50-minute movie series. It aired in theatres monthly during 2011, was produced by the studio Bones, written by Toshizo Nomoto and directed by Umanosuke Aida. This is a series that I'd never actually heard of until I was recommended it, so the only real expectations I had were based on the fact that it's a recent Bones production, which basically translates to, it's probably decent, but I doubt I'll be writing to the Queen about it. The series is set in a futuristic Tokyo in a world where certain human beings have been able to unintentionally awaken special powers and abilities. These powers come in the form of things like telepathy, super speed, or simply talking to flowers, and those who use them are not called mutants as you may think, they are called attractors. And much as you may expect, because we wouldn't have much happening otherwise, these attractors aren't particularly popular among the general populace. And the story surrounding this idea involves a covert organisation known as Kustos, whose general goal in life is to use their cyborg Simons to either capture or mutilate newly awakened attractors, who in turn aren't too fond of being captured and mutilated, so there is a group of these attractors who go around attempting to recruit their newly awakened kin and teach them how to not kill themselves and those around them. So to cut it short, you're in for about 5 hours of RoboCop versus X-Men. Sound good? This is an exceptionally simple story, one that can almost entirely be taken at face value, with all the motivation and reason behind any given action or incident being as clear as day at all times. This is something that carries a lot of inherent problems, but also a lot of great potential for entertainment as well. One of the biggest problems this simplicity brought early on was that the motivations for the Kustos organisation felt so one-dimensional until you get a look into the main villain's mind much later on. They didn't seem to have a good reason to act as they did, and for the most part it simply seemed like all that was on their agenda was, we've gotta kill them because they're aliens. This issue does get somewhat ironed out once the background of their organisation has some light shined on it, though it does end up involving something called the Council of 100 Kings, which just sounds all kinds of what? One positive thing that came off of this though was that early on we did not have a clear these are the good guys, these are the bad guys split. The protagonist, Quon, is on the side of the attractors, which puts you in their corner, but both sides seem to be fighting with common interests of peace in mind, until the more blatant corruption at the hands of the main villain took hold. Because Kustos' goal was not always made clear, it wasn't obvious who was right, which in any situation with similarities to war rings very true, because just because there are two opposite systems of ideals, it is not to be assumed that one of them is right and one of them is wrong. It felt like a war of attrition because neither side was really gaining anything when they won, and this served as a really good starting point. And it didn't remain like this for too long, because I think we can both agree that consuming 5 hours of attrition is not the most entertaining thing to do on a Sunday morning, even if the action scenes were bloody amazing. And that they were. The really interesting variety of powers on the attractor side, along with the remarkably cool designs of the cyborgs, made for some damn good fun. And I tell you man, I decided when watching this thing there is essentially nothing better than watching someone punch something only to have his fist explode and send the other guy flying away. There were some of those action scenes where I felt like I needed to audibly express my delight whilst watching, and that, my friend, is how you know you're entertained by what's in front of you, which is basically the best thing I could have hoped to get out of this. It was simple, it had a lot of very obvious and convenient storylines, and honestly lacked a true driving focus in its characters. But the thing is, I enjoyed it because though it didn't go beyond what I decided it was capable of after the presentation of its premise, it really did not need to. It was engaging enough to keep me interested, and it wasn't predictable enough for me not to be intrigued by the occasional twists and turns it took. And because it's so straightforward, that is essentially all I need to natter about this thing's story, and my next complaint now comes in the form of the issues I had with the show's protagonist, Quon Mitsushi. Now, he was by no means a bad character by any stretch, I just felt he was so vanilla. He was a very strong-willed and responsible character, he was calm and composed and very respectable, so it was completely believable with how he acted that the supporting cast would hold him in the high regards they do, but I just found him far too blandly righteous and far too perfect morally. There did end up being clearly established reasons later on in the story as to why he is like this, but because he is so idealistic and naive in this sense, I get similar vibes from him that I do from someone like Shiro from Fate Stay Night. He explicitly says, I want to save everyone, and puts himself in danger all the time, but never dies because he is, well, actually immortal. But I still stand firm saying I did not think he was a bad character, because though he had the charisma of a pair of slippers, he still fit into his role well, and he transforms into this ridiculously cool lizard man, and his arm had a lightsaber attached to it, so he's pretty cool. And the only other character I'd like to talk about is Epsilon, who is one of the cyborgs who fights for Kustos at the start. In the first couple of films, this guy doesn't really do much beyond following orders, but later on some incidents take place that would be spoilers if I were to go into detail on them, but essentially what they do is allow him to grow and change, which is something that was completely void from Quon's character, as he did not really really grow or develop throughout the story at all. Epsilon starts out as a very obedient and expectedly loyal machine. He does nothing beyond doing as he's told, but after an incident, he is conflicted. He gains a moral compass, which leads him to make decisions that, due to his position, affect the story in a big way. And you know, he spends most of the last film punching people through walls with his exploding flame punch. So he was, without a doubt, my favourite thing about the series. Unfortunately, there were some pretty apparent issues with some of the supporting cast though, and it was mainly down to the fact that there were certain characters that simply needed more development. A great example of this is the relationship between Epsilon and a female cyborg he fights alongside in the early stages. It throughout felt like there was going to be something really important and meaningful coming from this later on. And though something does happen, it felt so anticlimactic when it resolved with almost no repercussions. On the flip side though, some of the side characters were very well presented and the overall sense of community between them was brilliant. It was just a select few and the interactions that went along with them that felt like a great deal of their potential was wasted. And now, as we take a brief journey into talking about the visuals, I can basically sum up this thing's style by saying, you know, it looks like a Bones show. It has all those stylistic design aspects we're used to seeing from their stuff like Zammed and Hero Man, so you can expect a lot of wonderful colour and a really memorable set of designs from its cast. I may not Quon's character, but his design was brilliant with that banging burgundy coat and asymmetrical head plumage, and we've already talked about his other form. And the animation quality was some of the best I've seen from them, and it is this that made the action scene so bloody good, and because of the assumed higher budget from it being a film series, it was really consistent as well. It had its fair share of CG, but it was really well done and perfectly integrated because it was mainly used on the machinery and technology. It was exactly what I wanted to see, and it made me annoyed that it didn't come out on Blu-ray over here. 480p? And on what goes into the ear side of the production, the first thing I want to mention is what the hell is up with this theme song?
Feel like emotion, running like emotion, moving on good, cause on out to it,
Is it just me, or does that not at all sound like the kind of song that should be present in an anime about superheroes punching Beetleborgs? I don't even think it's a particularly good track generally, but it completely and utterly stuck out for me as not even remotely matching the feeling of what this series is trying to do. Then in terms of the insert songs and background music, they were actually pretty damn good, and one thing I certainly enjoyed about them is that they were really appropriately integrated and never overpowering. They even knew when to opt for silence as the situation called for it, and it was nothing like that theme song, and it was all incredibly fitting to the mood and feeling of the series. Which leads us into the final portion of this audio segment, that being the voiceover, which involved a very broad and recognisable cast who were each able to fully fill out the roles they were performing. I had basically no problems, and it was a great display of the talent of those involved in this side of the project. And now I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, and that this thing was just so bloody entertaining for me. It was able to present this incredibly straightforward and honestly quite cliched narrative in a way that made full use of the potential that came with it. The fact that I could sit there, completely zone out, and just enjoy the action adventure without a care in the world is something commendable in my eyes. It's popcorn fiction, and though it's no immeasurably wonderful feat of storytelling, it brought in spades a lot of the kind of things I enjoy about Bones productions, and well, you know, anime in general. So for them, their reasons, I shall be awakening a spherical 69% rating on Towa Quon and think all my fellow exploding punch enthusiasts should get on it like a car bonnet. In the UK, this thing is licensed by Manga Entertainment, in the US by Sentai Filmworks, and in Australia by Madman, and those of you stateside are able to get this thing on Blu-ray, and you should, like, totally do it. So, have you seen this show? If so, what did you think of it? And as always, feel free to drop me a recommendation of what you want me to review next. Now then, let's assume last week was but an anomaly that won't be repeated. Hopefully. See you next week. Ow! Throat, bastard.